All right, everybody, stop clapping.
This isn't me in the video, but every Christmas and Hanukkah, ever since I was young, getting a new console, that's basically how I acted. All the way up to even this Xbox today.
Oh my god.
A game console is a small, specialized computer. It will actually help gamers forward a high advanced computer. According to the Entertainment Merchants Association in 2011, 160 million consoles were sold last year, netting $30 million in revenue. Jesus. I love that. Yeah, so to understand a game console, we'll start with a brief history of game consoles. We'll move on to how a game console works, and then finally we'll move to the future of gaming. The history can be broken down into 8 generations. The first generation being the brown box was the first entertainment console built. It was actually built for the military. It was done in 1960. It was a way to train soldiers to have better reflexes. The Odyssey was then released in 1972. It was the first consumer console, and it was released with the game Pong. Unfortunately, the Pong game was so successful it oversaturated the market and killed the game consoles altogether, causing the first crash in the beginning of 1977. Fortunately, though, in the last part of 1977, the Atari Vcs came out. When this came out, it was revolutionary for the time. For the first time, you could have one console with multiple games that you can choose. In this case, it came with Asteroids, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and major games of the time. Time magazine labeled this in 2010 as the golden age because of the technical advances that are actually still used today, just with much more processing power. The third generation was known as the Dark Age. The reason why the Atari was so successful that third-party games, gaming companies started producing more and more games. They didn't even care about how good the game was, just as long as they released it. Consumers lost faith and moved on to new, cheaper computers such as the Apple. Fortunately, Nintendo came out in 1985 after 2 years of horrible, horrible games. The Nintendo came out with its main star, Mario. It was labeled the Renaissance by TIG Media in 2008. The reason why, it was taking old technology from the Golden Age and putting new, better technology into the old existing stuff to make something better. Moving into the 5th generation, we have the Genesis, which was huge. It was the first time that 16-bit processor was used. Up to this point, an 8-bit processor was being used. It came out with Sonic, and for the first time, Sega was actually producing enough revenue to become one of the major components. Super Nintendo then came out in 1991 and crushed Sega. They came back to the top as the industry leader. 6th generation was the console war, the start of it. PlayStation got its start on the market because they tried partnering up with Nintendo. Nintendo said, screw you, basically, and PlayStation was made. Nintendo 64 came out in 1996, and it was so successful because it was half the price of any of the other consoles on the market that for the first time it was recognized as the most sold console of its time. Moving into the 7th generation, the introduction to the internet. The Sega Dreamcast was unfortunately Sega's last console to be created, but it was the first to have internet capability. When Sega went bankrupt in 2000, PlayStation 2 came out in its place. PlayStation 2 was so successful in the first 3 hours of it being released, it was completely sold out. It's actually sold so many consoles, it has the new record of the most sold console of all times. It still holds that today. Nintendo tried taking the market back with the GameCube in 2001, but unfortunately it was too little, too late, and for the first time, Nintendo couldn't take its spot back in the first place. We're currently in the 8th generation. There's only 3 companies left, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony. Few keep on coming up every now and then, but these are the only ones that are leading the way. This generation has actually had the most advancements out of any generation to date. Now that we know a brief history, I'm going to show you how a console works. Consoles have 3 main components that make them work. You have the console itself, you have an input and an output. The console itself is basically, yes, I avoided the warranty by doing this. It's basically a compact computer. You have a CD drive, you have processors, motherboards, memory, and you even have hard drive for the memory. To communicate with the console, you have the actual controller. Today's technology has things like the Kinect that allow your body to be the controller. And we also have the internet, which is a huge input for people all around the world to connect together and play games. The final is the headset, which allows you to communicate with other players in the game. Jeff Tyson from How Stuff Works said the ease of connecting to a home entertainment system is the reason why game consoles have gained so much attention. You have the standard cable, which is RCA, which allows standard definition, high def with HDMI cables, and the newest is 3D, which allows you to view games in 3-dimension. The future of technology is basically the same 3 companies we have today. You have the Nintendo Wii U, which is the only console that actually has a release date. Nicole Zalvich in 2011 said that the release date should be 2012, somewhere in April to November. It's going to be revolutionary. Xbox 720 and PlayStation 4 are only ideas at this point. No actual release date has been given, but we should see some big advancements. Today we have discussed the history, we have discussed how a console works, and we also have discussed a little bit of the future of gaming technology. So who knows, maybe one day you'll see me in line or on YouTube screaming at my new Wii U, going, "Oh my God!" and excitement.